cruel, reckless, and irresponsible is how you're describing this. So I do want to talk about a part that you would probably call the irresponsible part, and that's raising the national debt by trillions of dollars. The CBO, which is nonpartisan, said that they could see the national debt being raised by $3.8 trillion. And lawmakers who have described themselves as deficit hawks, Republicans, hardline Republicans, some of them voted for this bill, and Republicans have long said that they were the party that is focused on bringing down the national debt. When you've had conversations with your Republican colleagues on, hey, this is going to raise the national debt and not by a little bit in the trillions, what was their answer?
The answers were not good. I had one colleague, and again, I have many friends across the aisle. I think, they're stuck right now. They know that this is irresponsible. But one of them told me, well, we'll just grow our way out. And in other words, the growth that would come from the bill would pay for itself over time, would pay for those tax cuts over time. The problem is that just doesn't work, and it hasn't worked for decades. It didn't work under Ronald Reagan. It didn't work under George W. Bush. It didn't work under Donald Trump when he was president before, and it's not going to work this time. When in 2017, the original Trump tax cuts were put in place, at the time, Paul Ryan and House and Senate Republicans said that those tax cuts would pay for themselves, but they added around $1.7 trillion to our debt. And this time it's, as you said, estimated around $3.8 trillion. And I think that number is actually higher because if you look at a couple of the signature policy proposals in the bill that President Trump ran on last year, no tax on tips, no tax on overtime specifically, those are set to expire in this bill as currently drafted at the end of Trump's term. And on the other hand, if they are extended beyond, for the full decade or longer, the impact on the debt is more like $5 trillion rather than the 3.8 trillion. In fact, I think even that 3.8 was updated to closer to 4. So it is deeply irresponsible. I am a Democrat who cares a lot about the debt and deficits. And I would just remind your viewers that the Affordable Care Act, when it was passed, it included the funds to pay for it. And it actually did pay for itself over time. I think that, fiscal responsibility is a really important thing. And look, I know that we're not going to agree across the aisle necessarily on how we get there. I think it needs to be a balance of spending and revenues. But it was very interesting to me, Brittany, that if you remember for a couple of days, President Trump said we needed to increase the top marginal rate on the very wealthiest Americans back up to the 39.6% that it was under President Obama. It was decreased under President Trump originally in 2017 to 37%. And so he said, for one day, increase that top marginal rate. And I thought that's a really good idea. That makes sense to me. If you could use that and pay down debt or use that to shore up our social safety net programs for those most vulnerable, I think that would be a good thing. But what happened is he got tremendous pushback from donors, from billionaire donors and from hardline conservatives that they weren't going to go for it. They didn't want to see a penny in increased revenues for those at the very top. They only wanted to see increased taxes for those at the very bottom.